Yeah. Okay. And hey, friend, you know that. So and okay. And have you ever thought about that? And have you ever really thought about it? Hey, friend, you know, because and have you yes, and have you thought about that? Have you ever, friend, you know, have you thought about it? Have you ever really, ever, really, have you ever really thought about that? Thought, thought about, and thought about what? Hey, friend, you know, and have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about what? That the people compete in the business? How people compete in business? You know, and how do people compete? Uh, how? You know, and how people? How? People. The way people, how people compete in business. How people compete? Compete in business. Compete in business. Business. Hey, friend, you know, and have you thought about that? And have you ever thought about how people compete in business? Yes, of course you are. Yes, I have. Yes. Yes, of course you are. Yes, yes, I have. That yes, and yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yes, of course. Yes, I have. And I feel like that. Most people, a lot of people, just compete on price. Compete on price. I feel like most people. I and I feel. I feel like that. I feel like most people. I feel that most people. And most people. I feel that most people just compete on price. Most people just and compete on price. Compete on compete and compete on price. So you know, I feel like a lot of people, most people just compete on price. True, so true. That's right. True, so true. As you see that they lower prices. They keep lowering. They keep lowering prices to try to sell more and more. They lower prices. They keep lowering prices to try to sell more. Can you see that they keep lowering prices? I know they keep lowering prices, lowering prices and prices to try to sell more, to try to sell more, to try to sell more. You can see, as you know, that they keep lowering prices to try to sell more. But honestly, you know what? and honestly, I think no, I don't think that works long term. I think no, I don't think that works long term. I think I don't. I don't think that. And I think no, I don't think that works. And I don't think that works. I don't think that works long term. I don't think that works. It works in long term, and long. Why not? Why not? And why? Why not? Yes, I think I don't think it works long term, but why and why not? And because if you drop your price, I know your competitors can just do the same thing. Because if you drop your price, your competitors can just do the same thing. Because if you do that, if you drop your price, if you drop your price, you know what? If you drop your price and your competitors can just do the same thing. Your competitors competitors can do the same thing, can just do the same thing, can just do the same, just do the same thing. So can just do the same thing, can just do the same thing. And I know if in the case that you drop your price, your competitors just do the same thing, and then it turns out that it turns into a race to the bottom, to the top, and to the bottom, and then it turns into a race. So, and you know that then it turns into, and you know that it turns into a race, into a race to the bottom, to the top, and to the bottom, to the bottom, to the bottom, to the bottom. So and if in the case that you drop your price and your competitors just do the same thing and it turns into a race to the bottom, exactly. You're right, absolutely you're right. And in the end, the margin get thin, very, very thin, really thin, and in the end. So, and in the end, yes, you know what, margins, they get really, really thin. Yes, you know that the margins and more margins that get thin, get really thin, get margins get thin, really, and they're really thin. So in the end, margins get real thin, and you make money No, barely make any money. Sometimes you are barely making any money, or even losing it. Sometimes make money, no, barely make. Sometimes when I know that, and you make, you are, I know you're barely making any money. You're barely making any money. You're making, no, barely making any money. Any yes, and any money, or even losing it, or and even losing it, lose, and or that even losing it. Sometimes I know you are barely making any money and even losing it. Right, that's right. You're right. That's right. And especially when your customers that get used to low prices, once your customer get used to low prices, and especially when and once that your customers get used to low prices. You know, your customers, and once, especially when your customers that get used to low prices, that they get used to low prices, and prices. When your customers get used to low prices, I think that's all they need. That's all they cared about. That's all they cared about. That's all they need. I know that's all. That's all they cared about. They need. They care about. You know, that's all they cared about. And we started paying attention to quality too. They stop paying attention to quality. You know, they stop. They stop paying attention to quality. Pay attention. To quality. So you know what? That's all they need. That's all they want. That's all they cared about. They started paying attention to quality. Yeah, and I know that's risky. You're right, and yeah, and I know that that's risky. That's risky. That's risky. I know that's risky. Why? How so? Why? And how so? Why and why not? How so? You lose control of the game because you lose control of the game, and you become dependent on price, completely dependent on price. Because you know that you lose control. And no, because that you control, no, you lose. You lose control of the game. You lose control of the game. Control the game. Because you lose control of the game, and you become dependent on price, and besides that you become dependent on completely dependent on price, and dependent on price. So you know that because you lose control of the game and you become completely dependent on price. And what should I do? What should you do? What should we do instead? What should businesses do instead? So what should I do? You do, we do. And what should I do, you do, and the businesses do instead? What should the businesses do? Businesses do instead. What should I do? What should I do instead? And I think that you should compete on value. I think that they should compete on value, and I think they should. They should. They have to. They need to compete on value. Compete on value. Value. So, what do you mean by value? So, what do you mean by value? What do you mean, man? And what do you mean? What do you mean by value? What do you mean? And I think that is the things isn't everything you bring to the customer. I think it's everything you bring to the customer. It's everything. The things is and everything is the things and everything you bring to the customers. You bring to your customer. The customer is everything you bring to product. No, I don't think that just the product itself, but the whole experience. Just the product. No, not just product itself. And not just the product. Not just the product itself. Not to the product it itself. Not to the product itself. It itself, but the experience, the whole experience, but the whole experience, but the whole experience, the whole experience, and not just the product itself. The service, the trust, and the service, the trust. and the your service, the service, the service, and the trust, the service, and the trust. So can you give me some? And can you give me an example? Can you give me some examples? And say, can you give me an example? Can you? Please show me. And can you give me? And can you give me some? Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example? Can you give me some? Yeah, sure. Okay, just thinking about 2 coffee shops. Yeah, sure, man. Sure. And just think about coffee shops. 2 coffee shops. Think about this. And think about 2 shops, coffee shops. 2 coffee and coffee shops. 2 just think about that coffee shops, 2 coffee shops. One is cheaper, but the space of it isn't great. Also amazing. No, isn't great. And besides, the staff isn't very friendly. One is cheaper. One is cheaper. So, and one is cheaper. What is cheaper? Cheaper. One is cheaper, but the space isn't great. But the space and the space is and it's great. No, isn't. And isn't great. The space is and isn't great. Isn't great. I know one is cheaper, but the space isn't great, and the staff isn't very friendly, and the staff isn't very friendly, and isn't friendly. No, isn't very friendly. Isn't very friendly. So and the other one costs more, but just a bit more. Costs more, just a bit more. And the other one, and the other one costs more, just a bit more. Costs more, a bit more. And the one is cheaper, and the other one costs more, a bit more. But it's comfortable. And the service is awesome, amazing, and excellent. But it's comfortable. But it's more comfortable. It's comfortable. It's more comfortable. It's comfortable. It's more comfortable, and the service is excellent. Awesome, amazing, and that the service and the service and the service is excellent. Awesome, amazing. Is excellent. Is excellent. Which one would you choose? Which one would you choose? And what do you think? Which one would you choose? And which one? Then which one would you choose? Which one would you choose? So, what do you think? Which one would you choose? Honestly, maybe probably I choose the second one. The second one. Honestly, honest, and always know that probably maybe the second one. Probably. Honestly, probably the second one. Probably the second the second one. Yeah, right. Exactly. You're right. Exactly. And because it feels worth it. As you know, I know you're just buying coffee and you're buying the experience. Because it feels worth because it's worth it. It's worth it. Because you know that it feels worth it. It's worth it. And it feels worth it. Worth it. Because it feels worth it, it's worth it. And I know you're not just buying coffee. I know that you're not just buying coffee. Because I know that you're not just buying coffee. I'm sure I bet that you're not just buying coffee. You buy the experience. I know you're buying experience. And you're buying. You're not just buying, you're buying. You're buying. Not just. Because I know you're not just buying coffee, you're buying the experience. And the experience. But experience. That makes sense. Absolutely right. That makes sense. That I know that makes sense. I know that makes sense. And so value isn't just about the product. It's about how you feel, how I feel, how we feel, how the customer feels. And I know the value isn't about the product. So, and value is all about. No, isn't just about the product. Isn't just about. Isn't just about a product. So, and you know what value is all about? No, isn't just about a product, and it's all about how customer feels. It's about how we, you feel. Yeah, it's about how the customer feels, how the customer, the customer, how the customer feels. And exactly, you're right. Okay, exactly, you are. Exactly. So exactly. And Yeah, exactly. Exactly, you're right. Because when, especially when you create value, real value, not fake. When, especially when you create real value. When, especially when when you create, when, especially when you create value, real value, and real value. And your customer, that people are willing to pay more and more. People are willing to pay more. I'm sure that people are willing to. The people willing to and are willing to, are willing to pay more. Pay more. Yeah, pay more. So you know that when you create a real value, people are willing to pay more. And besides that, and they come back. I'm sure they come back, and they come back. Come back. I'm sure. I bet that they come back. So even they recommend you to other people. They might even recommend you to other people, to others, and that and they might even recommend you to other people. And I know that they might even recommend you. They might even recommend you to other people. Recommend and recommend you. Recommend you. They might even recommend you to other people. To others. So you know that, and they come back too. They come back to even, and they might even recommend you to other people, others. And that's it. And then that's more important. That's way more important. I know that's important. It's very important. That's way more important. It's very important. I know that's way more. That's very important. That's way more important. That's way more important. So the being cheap and losing customer later, I think that's a very important. That's way more important than being cheap and losing customer later. Than cheap and being cheap and losing customer later. Cheap and being cheap and losing customer later. Losing. Losing customers. Customers later. So you know what? That's very important. Then that's way more important than being cheap and losing customer later. Absolutely, you're right. Totally, you're right. Absolutely, you're right. That competing on prices is very easy. It's very easy to do. Competing on price is easy. Competing on price. Compete and competing on price. Competing on price is easy. It's very easy to do. But competing on value is a hard, is a difficult, is much more harder. Is it hard? Is it harder? Much harder. But competing on value. But competing on price, competing on value. But competing on value. Is hard, is much harder. It's much harder. And it is that is much harder. Competing on price is easy, but competing on value is much harder. When because that you have to understand, you need to understand your customers. You actually need to, should understand your customers. Because you know that you have to. You actually have to. Because that you actually have to understand. You have to understand. You have to understand your customers. Understand your customers and customers, because you know what, because that you have to understand, you really actually have to understand your customers. Improve, keep going, keep moving, keep improving. You have to keep improving. And I know you have to. You have to understand, and you have to keep moving, keep improving. You have to keep improving. Keep going, keep moving, and improving. You have to keep improving. That you have to understand. You have to keep moving, and it takes time. A lot of time. It takes long-term investment too, and it takes a lot of time. And the end. It takes. Sure, it takes. And it takes time. And a long-term investment. The long-term investment. It takes long-term investment. Investment. It takes. So, but in the end, I think is that it's good. It's very, very good. It's better, and it's more sustainable. But in the end, it's better. But in the end, in the end, I think yes, it's more sustainable, and it's more sustainable, and sustainable. But it takes long-term investment. In the end, it's more sustainable. It's better. So. And besides that, I think a lot of people are scared to charge higher prices, because I think a lot of people are scared to charge higher prices. I know, I understand, and I think a lot of people a lot of, and I think that a lot of people are scared too, or scared to charge higher prices, too scared to charge higher prices, charging higher prices and higher price and prices. Besides that, and one more thing is that I think a lot of people are scared to charge higher prices, and they worry customers won't buy. They worry that they worry their customers won't buy. They worry that customers, they worry customers. They are the customers. The customers won't buy. That they won't buy. Yeah, true. So true, I know. But the question is that, but the real question isn't that whether the price is high and low or low. But the question is that the real question isn't whether the price is high or low. But you know what? Yeah, that's right. I know. But the real question isn't whether the price is high or low. The real questions. But I know. Question the real. The real question. I know the real question. Question isn't whether the price is high or low. Isn't. Isn't. And isn't the price. Isn't the price. The price is high or low. Isn't high or low. So I see, I know, but the question, the real question is that the price is high or low, but the question is that is it worth it? Is whether it's worth it. But the real question is that it's worth it, and it's whether, and it's whether it's worth it. It's worth it. The question is that it's worth it. And if you feel that it's worth the money, then you just buy it. If people feel that it's worth the money, I'm sure they still buy. If you feel, I feel, and people feel that. I don't know if people feel. If people feel, you feel, I feel, it's worth the money. It's worth. And I'm sure I see that it's worth. It's worth the money. It's worth the money. It's worth the money. It's worth the money, and they still buy, and they buy, and they'll still buy, still buy. I like it, and I like your idea. I like the way you think. I like your mindset. I really like that idea. And yeah, you're right. And I like that. I really like. And I really like that idea. Your idea. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Because it's not just about the business. I think it applies. It applies to and how we work too, and how we live. It's not just about a business, and it's not about. It's not. No, it's not about. It's not just about. And it's not just. It's not just about business. I know it's not just about a business. It applies to how we work. And it applies to how we work, how we live, how we work. So it's not just about the business. It applies to how we work too. It applies to how we work too. Yeah, exactly. You're right, exactly. Yeah. So and don't forget that. Please remember, if you create value, and I know that you carve out your space, your own space. And if you create value, I'm sure that if you create value, I'm sure if you create a value, and you create your space, your own space, and you carve out your own space. You carve out your own space, your space, and your own space. So that if you create value and you carve out your space, your own space, and that you don't have to compete by lowering yourself, lowering yourself. You don't have to do that. I know you have to. No, you don't. No, you don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to compete by. You don't have to compete by lowering yourself, lowering yourself. And I know that that if you create your value, you create your space, and you carve out your own space, you don't have to compete by lowering yourself. I like that. I love that. I really love that. And I love it. I like that. I really like that. I love that. I really love that. So, and yet instead of racing to the bottom, to the top, to the bottom, instead of racing to the bottom, and instead of racing to the bottom, raising to, instead of raising to the bottom. So you know what, instead of raising to the bottom, instead of raising to the bottom, and that you push yourself higher, you're pushing yourself higher. I know that you push yourself, you're pushing yourself higher. Then you push, you're pushing yourself higher. And yourself, you pushing yourself higher. And I know instead of raising to the bottom, to the bottom, and you pushing yourself higher. Okay. So chúng ta sẽ đi look lại cái MC nha mà. Yeah. Yeah, hey friend, have you thought about that? And have you ever really thought about that? Thought about it, and then how people compete in the business? Have you ever thought about that? Really thought about how people compete in business? Compete in business? How are people compete in business? In business? How do people compete in business? Okay. Yes. Yeah. I have. I feel like that a lot of people just compete on price. Yes, I have, and I feel like that a lot of people just compete on price. Yeah, true. So true. And lowering. They keep lowering prices to try to sell more. As you know that, they keep lowering prices to try to sell more. But honestly, I don't think it works long term. Honestly, I don't think that works long term. But why not? Because if you drop your price, and they will do that too. Your competitors will do that too. Will do the same thing, and then it turns into the race to the top and or to the bottom. No, to the bottom. Then it turns into a race to the bottom. Exactly, you are. And in the end, margin get thin, really thin. So, and in the end, your margins really thin, get really thin. Sometimes that you make money, but barely making any money, or even losing it. Sometimes I know that you make money, a lot of money. No, barely making any money, or even losing it, losing it. That's right. Especially when your customer get used to low prices. I think all they need, that's all that they want. That's all they need. That's all they cared about. Especially once your customers get used to low prices, that's all they need. That's all they care about. And they started paying attention to the quality. They stopped paying attention to quality. Yeah, that's risky. That's risky too. But why? How so? Because you lose control of the game. Because you lose control of the game, and you become completely dependent on price, and you become dependent on price, and you become completely dependent on price. So, what should I do? What should they do? What should business do instead? I think they should compete on value. I think they should compete on value. But what do you mean, man? What do you mean by value? And is the thing, that isn't everything you bring to your customer. I think is everything you bring to the customer. The customers, not just the product itself, but the experience, the whole experience, your service, your product, and the trust. The service, the trust. Can you give me some examples? Can you give me an example? Yeah, sure. Just think about the two coffee shops. Coffee shops. Just think about the two coffee shops. The one is cheap, one is cheaper, but the space isn't great and the staff it isn't very friendly. And you can look at that. You can look at the other one. The other one costs more, I know, but just a bit more. But it's more comfortable. The service is great, also amazing, it's excellent. Which one? Can you tell me which one would you choose? Can you tell me? Honestly, probably the second one. Exactly, you are. Because just it's worth it. It feels worth it. You're not just buying coffee. I know you're buying the experience. You're right. That makes sense. I completely agree with you. I totally agree with you. So the value isn't just about the product. It's about how the customer. It's about how the customer feels. You know that the value isn't just about the product. It's about how the customer feels. Exactly, you are. And when you create real value, I'm sure the people are willing to pay more and more. Because you know that when you create more value, people are willing to pay more, and they come back too, and they come back too, and even that they might recommend you to other people, to their friends, colleagues, family. They might even recommend you to other people, others. I think that's very important. And that's way more important than it being cheap and losing customer later. That's way more important than the being cheap and losing customer later. Completely, totally. Competing on price is easy. I know it's very easy to do, but competing on value is harder, much harder. And because you have to understand your customers actually have to understand it, and you have to keep improving. And I know it takes time, a lot of time, long-term investment, but in the end, I think it's worth it. It's more sustainable. It's better. And one more thing is that I think a lot of people are scared to charge at higher prices. I think a lot of people, they think that people are scared to charge at higher prices. They worry the customer won't buy. They worry the customer won't buy. Yes. But I think the real question is that is it worth it or not? And isn't the price is high or low? I think the real question, the right question isn't the price is high or low. And is it worth it or not? It's whether it's worth it. If people feel it's worth the money, they still buy. I'm sure that if they feel, your customer feel that it's worth the money, they buy. They still buy. I really like that idea. I really like that. Your mindset. And is that it's not just about business. I know it applies to. It's not just about business. It applies to how we work, to how we live. Exactly. And if you create value, and you create your space, your own space, and you carve out your space, your own space, then you don't have to compare by lowering yourself. And then you don't have to compete by the lowering yourself. I love that. I really love that. Instead of racing to the bottom, and instead of racing to the bottom, I'm sure that you push yourself higher, and you're pushing yourself higher and higher. Okay, so okay, hai nhóm thì hôm nay cũng khuya quá rồi, là chúng ta sẽ dừng ở đây nha. Cảm ơn nhóm rất là nhiều anh. Và mấy cái bài này anh có để trên group á, nhưng có thể vào lấy nha. Ok. Và có cái gì anh sẽ nhắn trên group á, rồi chúng ta anh sẽ mở group á. Các bạn cứ tập bài, anh sẽ gửi bài chỉ định và nhóm tập đi, rồi cuối tuần các bạn nào cần chỉnh ngữ điệu thì anh sẽ hẹn các bạn lên Zoom rồi anh sẽ hướng dẫn và lớp đó không có tính phí yeah. Ok. Ok, nhóm nghỉ ngơi, nhóm thank you, cảm ơn nhóm nha. Và anh có mở lớp rèn ngữ âm, ngữ điệu và cái cách mà chúng ta nói chuyện thì vào 8 giờ tối của 2, 4, 6 thì ok. Và nếu như các bạn cần thì các bạn cứ hãy nhắn anh cũng được ha. Thank you. Và cảm ơn nhóm nhiều nha. Ok, thank you. Nhưng mà nghỉ ngơi thank you. Bye bye. Cảm ơn thank you. Bye bye nha. Bye bye, thank you. Cảm ơn nha. Bye bye nha.